So Friday Foster, there is a minor bit of debate, and I just want to clear this up to be, 100% candid. So 1970, 1974, Friday Foster strip through Chicago Tribune. So the argument is that it's the first nationally syndicated comic strip with a black lead character. There were a few comic strips before with black characters, like, for example, the Peanuts. Right. The Peanuts had Franklin, but he wasn't the main character. Right. There was another strip called We Pals, I believe. It came out in like 1968 or 69, and it had black characters, but it was black, white, Asian, Latino. It was basically like a multicultural version of the Peanuts.
Hey, what's up? This is Byron, and welcome to Gulf Coast Cosmos Presents. Today, we have a special guest, and the guest is Mr. Christopher Marlon, where we will be talking about a really, really incredible character and an incredible book, Friday Foster, the Sunday Comics. And we'd like to welcome Mr. Christopher Marlon.
How you doing, Byron? So I want to say thank you to you, Charmaine, Gulf Coast Cosmos, for having me on the show this week. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me about Friday Foster, the Sunday strips.
All right. Yeah, our pleasure, man. So before we get into it, if you would please introduce yourself and give us a little background about who you are and your career.
Okay, well, as stated before, I'm Christopher Marlon. I was actually born and raised in Houston, and the majority of my life there. Well, actually, LA may be battling for that record now. Actually, I just had my 20-year anniversary in Los Angeles, living here in Los Angeles last week. But I went to, after graduating high school, Houston, Lamar, go Texas. Went to Tuskegee University in Alabama, got a degree in finance. Then I worked in banking in New York City. Did that for almost 4 years. While I was there, I had a developing interest in the entertainment industry. And I'll even backpedal a little. Actually, right after I graduated from college, I came home for a few months before I went to New York, and I worked on the movie Jason's Lyric. I was a production assistant. Yeah, man. I'm in a scene, if I'm not mistaken, Byron, for like this long. I think it's like a carnival scene. You'll see me walking through walking across the way there.
So here's our 6 degrees of separation. I was a PA on I was a PA on Jason's Lyric.
No way, man.
I was a PA on Jason's Lyric. I promise you.
Wow.
That was gonna be my foot in the door. Jason's Lyric. Yeah.
I mainly worked in the office, so you must have been on set.
I got to fetch water for everybody. So yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really, 0 degrees of separation. So that's amazing. So so that's kind of where I kind of got my first experience in the entertainment industry. But after that, when I worked in New York, I actually interned at Bad Boy Records while I was working in banking. I had my day job, interned at Bad Boy a little over a year. And I decided while I was there that, I was like, I enjoyed banking. I got a degree in finance, but I don't know if I want to crunch numbers for the rest of my days. So I ended up applying to film school. I got in at the University of Miami down in Florida. So I got my graduate degree at UM, go Canes. And after that, I ended up going back to Houston after I graduated from film school. I think I went home for maybe like 2 years, maybe 2.5, saved some money, and then I came out to Los Angeles in 2002. And I say, I've been out here, chasing the dream for the past 20 years.
All right.
And in my time here, I've worked production. I worked on the corporate side.
Okay.
And, I made a bunch of short films a lot of people haven't seen. And this Friday Foster is one of my latest projects as a content creator.
All right. Okay. So with Friday Foster, what was your official role with the book?
Well, my official title is the editor. And in this context, specifically in this context of this book, I conceived the project, and when we came to the physical, all the content that's within the book, That came down to me. I had a really, really cool publisher. It was a startup company. And the guy that owns the company, Ablaze Publishing, got to give a big shout out to my man, Rich Young. He gave me a lot of creative leeway, especially Byron, for a dude who had never done a book before.
Do you often hear, so when you hear of editors with publishing companies, they don't typically get the amount of creative freedom that you get?
I'll be honest, I don't 100% know, but I'm assuming not.
Right.
Again, my theory is this, and I kind of give the backstory of how this whole project came together. But my theory in terms of creative freedom is that it's a startup publisher. I think their first book just came out in 2019. And they have, I'm sure that the publisher, Rich and company have a lot of, they got a lot of balls to juggle. So I pitched him the idea of Friday Foster. He's like, hey man, I like it. And once we decided to go in and do it, he was like, okay, this is what you need to do. This is step number one. And he would give me a sample of step number one. Step number two, here's how you do it. So he kind of walked me through the process, but he let me do it. And I was like, hey, this is my spin on it. And he would sign off yes or no, or make some tweaks here, and we'll go on to the next step. So in terms of like what you see in the book, I mean, I got like 95% of what I wanted. So for a creator to get that in any book, I think it's pretty awesome. So like I said, Rich put a lot of trust in me, and we turned out with a great project. He's happy with it. I'm overjoyed. So everybody went home happy on this one.
So tell us about like how this all started. You didn't just like wake up one day with Friday Foster on your mind. How did all of this happen?
Or
maybe you did. I don't know.
No, I did not. So it's January 2022 now. I would say probably about 2015, I believe, 2016. Like I said, I went to film school, big film fan. But around 2015, 2016, I got on this blaxploitation kick. So, for those who don't know, blaxploitation are basically movies made primarily Black actors, writers, directors from let's say 1970, 79. It all started kind of with Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. But I got on this kick of watching these blaxploitation movies. I knew about, most of them, but I hadn't seen them, or I'd seen bits and pieces of a lot of them. So I got on this kick, started watching a bunch of blaxploitation flicks. I discovered, we know that Pam Grier is kind of like the queen of blaxploitation. So I'm watching her movies, and I discovered Friday Foster. That's probably one of her lesser known blaxploitation movies. Okay. So I'm watching Friday Foster, and I'm like, wow, I realized tonally that it's a lot much more different than other blaxploitation movies. Specifically in the sense of it has a lot more humor in it than most blaxploitation movies. Most blaxploitation movies are like, sex, violence, and you got to get back at the man. Whereas this one has a similar storyline, but a lot more humor. So I started reading about the movie, and I discovered that it's based on a comic strip. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of unique, especially for a Black movie, right? So I was like, it's a Black movie. I'm assuming the comic strip is Black. Started reading about the comic strip, and I'm like, wow, man, this is really cool. And a little bit of backstory, I used to collect comic books as a kid. And I've kind of started recollecting as an adult, maybe like over the past, maybe 10, 15 years. Since I moved to LA, I kind of started getting back into comics again.
Right.
So, I already had that connection. So I started reading about the comic strip, newspaper comic strip. And wow, I just fell in love with the artwork, and the stories were pretty cool. And I'm like, man, you know what? I collect comics. Let me see if I can actually find some of the originals, because I was reading the comic strips online, just wherever I could search for them.
Okay.
So I do a little more research and find out, hey, people collect these things. They just like people collect comic books, they collect comic strips. Come across this guy on eBay, and all he sells is comic strips. I gotta say, big shout out to this dude named Cliff. And he's like of all places, like Maine or New Hampshire. I was like, hey, what are you doing way up in Maine selling comic strips?
Friday Foster.
Yeah, but this dude had everything. So I go do a little research, and he had like a batch of them for sale. And I was like, you know what, man, I'm gonna start collecting these strips. Start collecting the strips, and I'm only doing the Sunday color. By way of my research in the comic strip world, I discovered that for newspaper comic strips, Sunday is always color, or typically color, and Monday through Saturday is black and white. And Sunday is much larger in terms of the format than Monday through Saturday. Monday through Saturday, you might get 3 or 4 panels, but Sunday can be anywhere from 9 to 15 panels. So you get larger format and it's color. So I start collecting the Sunday color strips, and I'm like, man, you know what? I wonder, has this thing ever been collected into a book, a la Charlie Brown or the Boondocks?
Right.
Start doing a little research, find out there's no Friday Foster book. So I was like, you know what, Chris, I'm gonna make a promise to myself to at least try to get a Friday Foster book published of the Sunday color strips, because that was the only thing I was collecting.
Okay.
So do a little research, find out it's the Chicago Tribune newspaper was the original syndicator of the strip. Start doing more research. Ultimately, find the point man at the Chicago Tribune, and I'm like, hey, you don't know me. I'm a filmmaker in LA. I love Friday Foster. I want to try to collect this thing into a book. Give you the Cliff Notes version. Originally, he says no. And I was like, what? I'm heartbroken. He's like, no, I can't get into it, but there's things happening at the company. Can't license the strip now. I was like, okay, man. So I just go back, kind of put it on the back burner, and I just continue to collect these strips because the strip ran from 1970 to 74. So in terms of Sundays, that was a little over 200 strips that I was trying to get. I wanted to get all of them.
Right.
I think it's about 214. So by way of my research, buying more strips, I come across a guy that's selling me some strips, and I'm just talking to him online. I think it was on Facebook, and I was telling him, hey man, I'm collecting these things, so I really want to try to do a book. And he's like, that's funny, because I just talked to these Spaniards, and they're doing a book too. I was like, what do you mean they're doing a book? Because as it turns out, I knew he was talking about because I'd encountered these guys along my way. He was like, yeah, they just told me they're doing a book. I was like, okay, thanks, man, for the information. So I go back to the Chicago Tribune, and I was like, hey, man, I heard that there's some guys over in Spain who are doing a Friday Foster book. I was like, what's the deal? I was like, you talked a couple of months ago, you said it was a no-go. He was like, oh, yeah. Okay, well, the rights are available now, but you got to find a publisher. You find a publisher, we can talk. I was like, okay, I'll call you back when I find a publisher. Wow. And what I think happened, Byron, was I think at the time that the Chicago Tribune newspaper was, I think it was up for sale. I think is what happened. Because I started doing some research when he told me no. So I could understand if something's over for sale. They're not trying to do any like major licensing deals or whatever. So that's my theory about why he originally told me no. So I was like, cool, I'll call you back when I find a publisher. I started, go to the comic book shop. I'm making a list of all these companies that, that publish the hardcover books, softcover, collection books. And then get online, find out who their contact persons are. And I'm just starting to make cold emails. Somewhat early in the process, come across this guy. And, he was like, I called him, I think he's at work. And I'll never forget this man because he was talking like all low, like he didn't want to be heard. He was like, hey, man, I really want to talk to you about this project, but, can we talk later? Can I call you at another time? But it's really interesting. I was like, okay, cool, dude. Let's talk later. So we were talking later. And ultimately, he was like, well, you know what, man? I was at work when I was talking to you, but I'm about to leave my job. And he works like a major publisher. He's like, I'm about to leave my job, and I'm going to start my own publishing house. But I like this Friday Foster idea, and I want to do a deal with you. I was like, cool. So I ended up connecting this ultimate who was Rich Young and Ablaze, connected him with, we all get on a call with Chicago Tribune, and we do the deal. And, what it was about, after we signed the paperwork, I guess it was about 3 years, after we signed the paperwork, the book came out. Now, the caveat is the book came out December of last year, December 2021. It was supposed to come out June of 2020. But like most things in life, it was coronavirus delayed. So, COVID, COVID cost us like 18 months, but we made it. So that's the long version to a short question.
Because I was going to ask with that timeline, you mentioned the Spanish people publisher. I'm curious because this being such a strong historical American piece of publication, let's just put this into perspective. Friday Foster is the first comic strip that features a Black American woman. We are, and from 1970 to 1974, we're talking right after Diane Carroll is the first Black woman, Black American woman, to have her own syndicated television show in Julia. So you have these things, and I'm just curious as to how in the heck did it get over in Spain? That's amazing. But that's neither here nor there at this point, because here we are with this incredible book. I don't have the book with me, but this book is amazing. And
hold on 1 second. I got one right here just so we can show it off.
All right. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I usually keep a copy. I should have had it already out the box, but here we go. Bam. So
bam. There it is. That thing is pretty. So when we got them at the shop, And I opened the box and I was like, this is pretty. I mean, it's. Can we call it a coffee table book? Because I mean,
like to call it a coffee table book. That's what I've been. That's how I was pitching it from the very beginning. So I mean, it's a if you can't tell, hardcover. You got to believe what 304 pages.
304 pages, right?
Full color throughout.
Right. What else comes in the book? What else are they? It's not just comic strips. What else is in the book?
Right. Hey, can I step back for a real quick second, Byron?
Yes.
2 quick sidebars. So you mentioned Diane Carroll with her show Julia.
Yes.
For Friday Foster, there is a minor bit of debate, and I just want to clear this up to be 100% candid. So 1970, 1974 Friday Foster strip through Chicago Tribune. So the argument is that it's the first nationally syndicated comic strip with a Black lead character. There were a few comic strips before with Black characters, like, for example,
That's
the Peanuts.
right.
The Peanuts had Franklin, but he wasn't the main character.
Right.
There was another strip called We Pals, I believe. It came out in like 1968 or 69, and it had Black characters, but it was Black, white, Asian, Latino. It was basically like a multicultural version of the Peanuts, called We Pals. But it did predate it, but again, a bunch of different kids, different races, ethnicities, even like disabled kids. But even way back before that, in the 1940s, there was a Black woman created a strip. Her name was Jackie Orms, and she created a strip called Torchy Brown. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yes.
And Torchy was syndicated before my research. I may be staying wrong on this, but it came out of it was mainly distributed through Black newspapers. So that's the differentiating line, that Black newspapers had Torchy Brown, and Chicago Tribune, which is obviously a major American paper, distributed Friday Foster, because it was here in LA, the Los Angeles Times. It was in Houston, in the Houston Chronicle, New York Newsday. So I think it ran from my research, about 26 papers coast to coast at its peak. Friday Foster did. So Jackie Orms's Torchy Brown predated it by 30 years. But again, Black newspapers, whereas Friday Foster, major mainstream papers. And for those,
shout out to Jackie Orms for Torchy Brown.
Yes. And there is a book on that too, if you want to do a little more research. And also the connection with the Spaniards is this. So the artist of the book, I'll show you here again.
Right.
You can see the guy who created it was actually a very liberal white guy named Jim Lawrence. So Jim Lawrence created the strip, but the artist was a Spaniard named Jordi Longarón. So that's the connection to Spain.
Got it. Okay.
And again, this is obviously way back, predating the internet. Jim Lawrence lives in New Jersey. He would write the stories out, write the scripts, mail the scripts to the Chicago Tribune. They would sign off on the scripts and then mail the scripts over to Barcelona, Spain, where Jordi would illustrate them and then send the completed project back to the Chicago Tribune so they could print. And they were writing and producing these things and illustrating like 3 months in advance, because they had to make, it was a daily run. So they had to make those daily print dates. So they were writing, like I said, almost 3 months, a quarter year out, just to make sure they would meet those dates. So that's the connection to Spain. And these two guys over in Spain, David and Javier, they were basically the equivalent of myself, big fans of the strip, and they wanted to honor Jordi. So they found a Spanish publisher, and they have a Spanish version, and then I've got the American version. And we actually, some of the articles in the book, we actually took from the Spanish book, and they're in this version.
That is incredible. So it isn't just national appeal; it's international appeal that
it is. I mean, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I wonder if there was that same appeal for the movie in Spain.
You know what? I don't know, because I did some research on it, but it was mainly around the American market. And I don't know, I'll be honest, how much blaxploitation movies traveled at that time. They obviously swept through America and were a huge financial success for those studios. Yeah. But I don't know if they traveled outside the States that well. One of the extra features, you asked about the extra features, one of the things that was really cool was that I got to interview the director of the Friday Foster movie. There's a guy named Arthur Marks. He still lived here in LA at the time. I believe I caught him in 2019. And I actually ended up interviewing him on his birthday, and I didn't even know it. And I believe, it's kind of crazy, man. I believe it was like his 90th birthday. So I'm interviewing him in his house. He gets a phone call, takes the call, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. That was my granddaughter wishing me happy birthday." I was like, "What?" So, oh, you didn't tell me today was your birthday. So I got to interview the guy who directed the Friday Foster movie. You know, great man. You know, was very generous with his time, and actually ended up passing away like about 3 months after I interviewed him. So I was so glad, so blessed and fortunate to get that interview.
Oh wow!
But to kind of go back to your question in terms of extra features, my original concept when I pitched Ablaze Publishing was that, hey, I want to look at Friday Foster from a 360-degree perspective, meaning anything that is is tangentially related to Friday Foster, I want to have it in the book. So obviously we've got the run of these Sunday strips in there.
Right.
Doing my digging, I actually found the son of the creator, James Lawrence, the creator. He passed away, I believe, in like 1993 or 94. So doing my research, digging, I found James Lawrence Jr. His son still lives in New Jersey. So I was like, hey man, you don't know me. I'm doing a book on Friday Foster, and I'd love to have you contribute, if you're so willing. And he was like, yeah. So he ended up writing the foreword for the book, and he got to basically, that's kind of like a love letter to his dad. So which was really, really cool to have, the creator's son and his namesake, write the foreword for the book.
Great. With the film, for those who have not seen the film, I strongly suggest that you see the film because Pam Grier is Pam Grier, regardless of whatever role she's placed in. But can you compare and contrast what, throughout your research and seeing the film and obviously working, as the editor on the book, and I might as well call you a curator because you've literally curated all of this fantastic work. Can you compare and contrast, what are, the movie?
I can tell you that there are, they intersect on a few points, Byron. Obviously the namesake of the character. There are a few characters from the strip that are also in the movie. Nice. So in the strip, Friday Foster has a younger brother who's like much younger. He's like almost like a child, maybe like a 10-year-old boy. In the comic strip, her younger brother is actually in the movie as well. In the comic strip, she actually works for this world famous photographer, a white guy named Sean North. In the movie, we don't see Sean North, but in the opening scene of the film, she's on the phone talking to Sean North, but you never see him within the movie. And also in the movie, there's another character from the strip, a guy named Blake Tarr, who's like this uber rich, like multi-millionaire who falls in love with Friday. And it's always been my contention that Blake Tarr is a play on words, as in black as tall. But
sometimes it's like, back then, like names were just a little too spot on. You're like,
yeah, exactly. But that character is in the movie, and he's actually played, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say, I forget. Oh, Thalmus. I always pronounce his last name wrong. Thalmus Rasulula.
Okay.
If you look up Thalmus, the first name Thalmus on IMDb, he'll pop up. You'll recognize his face. Okay. So that character is in there, and I think there's one more character from the strip, character named Colt Hawkins, who was kind of like this private eye character that she knew in the strip. And he's played, I believe, by Yaphet Kotto. And again, if you look up Yaphet Kotto, he's like a big actor from the 70s and 80s.
Everybody knows Yaphet Kotto. If you don't, shame on you.
Exactly. Right. So there's a few characters from the strip that are in the movie, but outside of that, in terms of storyline, it's a complete unique adventure that she goes on that is, never, existed in the comic strip. So they pull a couple of characters over, but again, completely unique story. Like, so you don't even see the main character, who was her boss, Sean North, the white dude, is like doesn't even exist.
Right.
One thing that's really cool about the movie, and I've told a few other people that if you haven't seen it, especially for a blaxploitation movie, it has a host of Black actors of the day that are not typically in blaxploitation movies. I mean, like everybody and their mama is in Friday Foster. And you'd be shocked because that's probably Pam Grier's least known blaxploitation movie.
Right. And it's got the huge cast. Yeah,
huge cast. Man, like Eartha Kitt is in it.
Yep.
Carl Weathers from Rocky is in it.
Yep.
Ted Lang, Isaac from The Love Boat is in it.
Right. Ed Backus. Yeah.
Ed Backus, Mr. Howell from Gilligan's Island.
Howell. Yeah.
And he's playing the bad guy, which is crazy. So I think he was severely underused. He needed to have a bigger part.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I already mentioned Thalmus. I already mentioned Yafet. So again, was it I think it's Scatman Crothers is in it. Guy who did the voice work for Hong Kong Phooey, the cartoon back then. You know, he was Shining.
Right.
So there's a host of black actors in this movie that you would be shocked to see.
Right.
In there. So yeah. So for that alone, I mean, like Ted Lang is playing a pimp in the movie, if I'm not mistaken. So, so you know. Oh, that level alone is worth seeing because again, you're not going to catch that many black actors that you know from that era in any other movie.
Right. In the comic strip, how do we? What is the unique thing about the character Friday Foster in the comic strip? What can we say is the most unique thing about her?
Well, I can say, considering the fact, Byron, that it was actually created by a white guy and obviously a very liberal white guy, James Lawrence. To give you a bit of a backstory how the character came to be, Jim Lawrence was basically what you call a journeyman in the comic strip industry. He had been writing comic strips for years. You know, he's kind of like a gun for hire. You know, so you need to get a comic strip written, you go to James Lawrence, he'll write out. A little known fact about him is that he actually wrote James Bond, the James Bond comic strip. It was never here in America, only over in the United Kingdom. But it was a long-running newspaper strip for James Bond there. And for what my research tells me is that he actually he has written more James Bond than Ian Fleming by way of that newspaper comic strip because it ran so long. He wrote the entire course of the James Bond comic strip.
Oh, wow.
But again, so he'd been working in the industry for years. It's the late 60s, you know, where they were in the midst of the Black Power movement. And James Lawrence was like, hey, I've been writing strips for years. You know, why are there no comic strips with a black lead character? You know, he kind of posed this question to the Chicago Tribune. And they were like, you know what, that's a great question, Jim. Why don't you go create one? And he turned around and he goes back and creates Friday Foster.
There seems to be always this, you know, there seems to be this, the story of like the liberal white creator going to a larger publication, them putting the onus back on the white male creator, saying, yeah, why don't you do that? Which is like how we got Black Lightning and how we got Black Panther. So yeah, it's
yeah, and I think that's a sign of the times, to be quite honest. You know what I mean? Because, you know, and it's easy to, you know, suppose, but, you know, you think, hey, if a brother had gone and pitched this idea, what would this Tribune have said? Who knows? You know, could have been no, probably would have been no, maybe yes, but we don't know this. All we know is what happened.
Right.
So he goes back, turns around and creates Friday Foster. Again, and in the book, I actually have some reviews, some pretty unique thing, one of the extra features I have, and it's very rare. I was surprised to find out it existed. They have, you know how we have movie reviews, how you had Siskel and Ebert back in the day, and everybody's a critic. Now everybody's got their own, you know, movie blog site. Right. There are actually 2 reviews, printed reviews of the newspaper comic strip before it came out, which I thought was really interesting. I was like, who is reviewing newspaper comic strips? But I guess it was such big news at the time that, you know, they were actually printed. And one is like, is in an industry trade, like a kind of like a newspaper trade. When they talk about it, and the other one I can't remember what publication it was in off the top of my head, but yeah, 2 reviews for the comic strip, which is very, very very hard to find and very cool.
Okay.
So what is the one thing I want to know is that what I do like the way he stylized the character, the way Jim Lawrence created the character, was that she was never this woe is me character. You know, she was in the story. She lives in Harlem, and the time, you know, it's of the day. So Harlem in the 70s, New York in the 70s was rough and tumble, man.
Yes.
So, you know, she's a single woman, you know, taking care of her younger brother, living in rough and tumble Harlem, New York in the 70s, but she's never woe is me character. She's very smart. She's ambitious. You know, she's beautiful. So for a liberal white guy to create that character, and he was conscious enough to not buy into the tropes of, hey, you know, I'm going to have this, you know, downtrodden character, I think was very smart on his end. But I would also say that, you know, would a newspaper print a comic strip about this kind of downtrodden character? Probably not. So in that regard, she was a woman of the time. She was very ambitious. You know, she was career driven. You know, she wasn't like, you know, like hung up on a guy chasing him the entire series. So, you know, she was really about, you know, her self-discovery, you know, and she literally just, the strip takes her on these worldwide adventures, which is pretty cool for a character. See this Black woman globetrotting, having all these wild, wacky adventures.
So do you think that because of his because of his experience in writing the James Bond character, that he took some of those elements and infused them into Friday Foster. Because in from what you're saying, that's what it sounds like. He created this, woman of adventure and named her Friday Foster.
Yeah, I think they could have had a play in it, but I know he wrote a lot of what they call adventure strips, because basically, I guess the comic strip world kind of falls into the adventure category, and then they have like what they call like the laugh-a-day or gag strips that are more funny.
Okay.
So, like Peanuts might be like the laugh-a-day gag strips, where every particular issue is going to be a joke, for that particular issue. Whereas every issue for her was a new adventure or a chapter in that adventure.
Right.
So yeah, I think, and again, James Lawrence, from what I know, wrote mostly adventure strips. So yeah, he definitely had that experience and that pedigree, and he kind of just transferred over to having a Black female lead, which is awesome.
Right, because I mean, it's like, in reading the book and going through the book and reading the strips, she's definitely not your Mary Worth or any of the other female-led comic strip characters.
Right.
Yeah, she's about it, and
she got into the mix, to say the least, which I love, man. I mean, she was a fearless character. I mean, she was dealing with everything, and in terms of storylines, I think the storylines are interesting because again, they kind of reflected some of the values of the day, some of which are still very relevant now. Like they had storylines on like women's body shaming, in terms of the main character Sean North. He's obviously a fashion photographer, and he decides to do a photo spread on full-figured gals. And then he's dating this character, and she turns out to be a very self-determined woman. And she was like, why do I have to be full-figured? Basically, why can't I just be a woman? So they talk about those types of issues in the story. And they get into stuff like things like family, like internal family battles. There's like old kind of like family, the head of the family who's about to die, has a lot of money. And then you kind of find out that people are kind of angling to see who's going to end up, taking over the family, the family dynasty.
Right.
I mean, she does stuff like, say, globe trotting literally all over the world, man, which is like, it's just, amazing. They take her to Africa in one of the storylines, which is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, man, it's very, very interesting just to see how this guy's, the creative thought process works.
So with Jim Lawrence's creating this character, like we were talking about earlier, we have this white male creator creating this iconic, might as well say, is this iconic comic strip character. Compare that to now, where we have the actual source of the character writing the story. Do you think that in this day and age, Jim's lending to the creation of a Black character would be helpful, or would it just, I don't know, kind of get in the way?
I mean, I think today, especially in the world we live in now, here in 2022, the obvious play would be, even if, let's say he were the sole creator, he were smart enough, and I think he would be, you always go to the source, I would say in any subject matter. So I don't care what it is. So even if you created Friday Foster solo, it would be wise for him to, at a minimum, consult, with some other Black female creators to be like, hey, I've come up with this character. What do you think? And maybe even better to say, hey, maybe, we can co-create this thing. You can bring in, bring a unique and authentic perspective to this that I would never have, being the exact opposite of a Black woman.
Right.
So,
for example, we have right now, we have Nubia and the Amazons being co-written by a Black woman and a non-binary individual, Vida Ayala and Stephanie Williams. And the storyline from the very beginning, it's like, yep, a sister wrote this. It just rings true. So
all over it.
Yeah, and you got, like, remember Luke Cage and his famous "Sweet Christmas," where you're going, who says "Sweet Christmas"? And it's like when I first read Luke Cage as a kid, I'm going, I don't, I'm like in my head, I'm like trying to recall. It's like, do any of my family members? Has my uncle ever said sweet quick?
So even the ones who don't cut, so like
right, jive turkey, so yeah. But I can appreciate the fact that Friday Foster, the character, throughout the entire run, it's like there was never a disservice to her as a character, and I was really impressed by that. Oh, with this book, what do you want the readers to take away from the book?
I don't want to get too profound or sound pretentious because I'm very very clear out about what I've created here. And for me, I would say it's just a sense of enjoyment. And I say if you're a fan of the 1970s, pop culture from the 1970s, if you're a fan of great artwork, if you're a fan of obviously comic books and unique comic storylines, then this is the book for you. I don't want to try to make some, kind of like erudite statement about, if you read Friday Foster, no, it's not that. I realize, it is a comic strip reprint collection. Right. So again, if you're a fan of the 70s, if you're a fan of seeing, Black women in media, unique voices and representation, especially that have been overlooked, I think you'll really, really, really enjoy the book. Because again, great.
Hold up that book again, because you got to look at the book is just. Yes, that it's
A-list artwork.
That is,
A-list artwork, great stories.
Right.
Man, and some awesome extra features that I've compiled for the book. Trust me.
Right.
Maybe about a fourth to a third of the page count is the extra features. Because again, I want to look at the character from every perspective possible that has been legally branded Friday Foster. So I even have an academic essay. I found a Spanish academic who's based here in the States, teaches at one of the colleges, I believe teaches college in Kansas, and he's written books on the connections of Black culture in America and the country of Spain, something you never think about. So he has an essay in the book on Friday Foster.
All right.
And actually, I think he had mentioned that character in one of his previous works. So I reached out to him, and he ended up writing an essay for us. But yeah, man. So yeah, it's really just a sense of enjoyment, man. It's a sense of nostalgia. Let's say taking you back to that era of the 70s. Yeah. So it's a fun time. Trust me.
All right, that's dope. Listen, Christopher, thank you so much for hanging out with us and chatting it up and talking about Friday Foster, Pam Grier, and the 70s. Before we go, tell us some of the other stuff that you're planning on working on, if you can share.
Gotcha. Well, I can say two that I want to do, and I already pitched the publisher on one of them. There's another newspaper comic strip called Dateline Danger. Dateline Danger, I believe, ran from the late 60s, like 1968 to about 1974. It's similar to Friday Foster in that it also featured a Black character. For my research, and I just started collecting this strip about a year and a half ago, and I have very few of them. Again, just Sunday colors. But Dateline Danger was apparently, it's another adventure strip, was apparently inspired by the show I Spy with Bill Cosby.
Okay.
Cosby was an I Spy, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah. So in that show, it was a Black guy and a white guy, and they basically were like government agents going on all these missions. Dateline Danger is the exact same premise. Black guy, white guy who work for this government agency, and they go across the globe, foiling, the evildoers. Again, that was actually created by two white guys. But again, the artwork is good. It's not as great as Friday Foster, but it's good. But again, I like seeing these Black characters globe-trotting the world, and just kind of being the man and saving the day. So that's Dateline Danger.
Okay.
So I would like to do that, but again, I've just started, doing my research on Dateline and just started collecting the strips. But if I were to do another comic strip reprint collection, it would be Dateline.
Okay.
Also, what I want to do, and I've actually pitched the publisher on this, I got to get back to him, I want to do a comic book miniseries, maybe like a 46 issue comic book miniseries. I want to do a mashup. Again, I'm a fan of the 70s, child of the 70s. I want to do a mashup again of two blaxploitation characters. Real quick, there was going back to Pam Grier. she had Foxy Brown, right?
Right.
So everybody knows that character. I want to do a mashup of Foxy Brown, and there was a TV show that ran for one season in the 1970s. I believe it was, I can't remember the year, I want to say maybe like 73, 74, show called Get Christy Love. I don't know if you remember that one.
I do. I shouldn't have been watching, but yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Get Christy Love was, I believe, the first hour-long show, because we had Diane Carroll.
Yeah.
But Get Christy Love was, I believe, the first hour-long drama on broadcast TV with a Black female lead.
Right.
And it was about this cop. Her name was Christy Love. Yep. And she, obviously, I believe it was set here in LA, but she was a cop, and basically it was a cop drama, 1 hour cop drama, lasted one season in the 70s. So I want to do a matchup book of Foxy Brown, Get Christy Love, Foxy Brown is the working title. And basically it's these two characters, and they kind of come together on this mission. And at first they're on opposite sides of the law, and then they are kind of working together. It's kind of a standard buddy cop movie where they, opposite sides of the law come together to foil this evil plot. So 4 to 6 issue miniseries for Get Christy Love, Foxy Brown. We'll see. I pitched the publisher. He likes it, but we got to go back and see if we can kind of get this ball rolling. And if not, maybe I'll hire the publisher. We'll see.
When the series comes out, so that's how I'm projecting. We're gonna do that the Black Creator projection. When it comes out, we're gonna need you to come back on the show, and we will talk about the show, and we will need you to come into the shop so that we can do a book signing for that too. All right?
Absolutely. I promise, as soon as it is done, as soon as I win, I will be at Gulf Coast Cosmos.
Hey, I can appreciate that. Thank you again so much for coming on the show and talking with us. And thank all of you for tuning in to Gulf Coast Cosmos Presents. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Byron. Thank you, Gulf Coast. Thank you, Charmaine. Y'all take care. God bless.